She never imagined that her worst day could lead to something so life-changing. Stranded on a rainy roadside with a broken-down car and her 6-year-old son in the backseat, Sarah Benson thought things couldn't get worse. But when a quiet stranger pulled over to help, hands covered in grease, eyes full of calm, she had no idea their chance meeting would set off a chain of events that would shake the very foundation of her life. That man, Deshaun, wasn't just a good Samaritan. He carried a story of heartbreak, sacrifice, and a secret powerful enough to threaten everything they were about to build together. And when Sarah's young son asked an innocent question, "Do you want to be my dad?" she did something unthinkable. She turned to a man she barely knew and asked the very same thing. What followed was a journey of love, danger, and redemption that would force them all to choose between the past that haunts them and the future they never expected. This is not just a story about fixing a car. It's about fixing hearts, finding family, and discovering that sometimes the most broken moments lead to the most beautiful beginnings. It was a stormy Tuesday evening in the quiet town of Willow Creek, a town where everyone knew your name but not always your pain. Sarah Benson, a single mom in her early 30s, had just picked up her 6-year-old son Lucas from school. The sky above was painted in dark grays, and fat raindrops began to splatter against the windshield of her aging Chevy Malibu. The heater barely worked, the windshield wipers groaned with every swipe, and the engine made that all-too-familiar wheezing sound she'd been trying to ignore for weeks. She let out a slow breath, gripping the wheel tightly. "Just get us home," she murmured under her breath, as if pleading with the car itself. Lucas sat quietly in the back seat, humming to himself while clutching his Spider-Man backpack. He was a quiet kid, shy around most people, but Sarah knew he was deeply observant. He often picked up on things she tried to hide, like her worry, her sadness, and how much she struggled to keep everything together. Suddenly, the dashboard lights flickered. Then came a loud sputter, followed by a puff of steam rising from the hood. Sarah gasped and pulled the car to the shoulder of the narrow, wooded road. The engine coughed twice, then died completely. The only sound now was the steady drum of rain against the roof and the hiss of steam as it curled into the cold air. "No, no, no, not now," Sarah groaned, resting her forehead against the steering wheel. "Mommy," Lucas's voice was small, unsure. "It's okay, baby," she said, forcing a smile as she turned around. "We just need to let the car rest for a minute." But deep down, she knew better. This wasn't a tired car. It was a broken one, and they were stranded. No cell service, no nearby houses. Just trees, a winding road, and the creeping fog of early dusk. With a sigh, Sarah grabbed her coat, stepped out into the chilly rain, and popped the hood. Steam billowed up, fogging her glasses. She stood there, staring at the mess of metal and wires, trying to recall what her father used to say about engines. But those memories felt distant, like an old song she couldn't quite remember the lyrics to. That's when she heard it, the sound of tires on gravel. Her heart skipped. She turned quickly. A rusty blue pickup truck slowed as it pulled in behind her. Its headlights cut through the mist, and for a moment all she felt was panic. A stranger, alone, no one around for miles. The truck door creaked open, and out stepped a tall man in work boots and a dark jacket. His face was calm, and his hands, grease, stained and weathered, hung casually at his sides. He looked to be in his late 30s, maybe early 40s. There was no menace in his step, just a quiet steadiness. "Need a hand?" he asked, voice deep but gentle. Sarah hesitated, instinctively stepping back, but then Lucas rolled down his window and peeked out, waving. "Hi." The man smiled. "Hey there, little man." Sarah's instincts told her to stay guarded, but something about the man's voice, the softness in it, put her at ease, if only just a little. "I think it overheated," she said, wiping rain from her face. "I'm Deshaun," he said simply, walking toward the car without waiting for permission. He peered under the hood, poked around, and within minutes diagnosed the problem. "Your serpentine belt snapped. That's why the engine died." Sarah blinked. "Is that bad?" "Usually, yeah, but lucky for you I got a spare in my truck. Same size, I think." "Seriously?" He nodded. "I work at Harris Auto. I always keep extras." As rain trickled down his neck, he got to work. Lucas watched him in fascination from the back seat while Sarah stood nearby. arms wrapped around herself, still unsure what to make of this unexpected moment of grace. 15 minutes later, Deshawn closed the hood with a solid thunk. Try it now. Sarah got in and turned the key. The engine roared to life. She stepped out, grinning. "You're a lifesaver." He shrugged with a modest smile. "Just glad I was driving by. Got a kid of my own. Wouldn't want anyone stranded like that." "You didn't have to stop," she said, genuinely moved. "Yeah," he replied, his eyes kind, "but I did." She paused, wanting to say more but not knowing how. "Can I at least pay you something?" He laughed. "Nah, just pay it forward." As Deshawn returned to his truck, Lucas leaned forward and whispered, "Mommy, I like him." Sarah smiled softly, watching the pickup disappear into the fog. "Me too." She had no idea she'd just met the man who would soon change everything. A week had passed since the roadside breakdown, but the memory of that rain-soaked evening lingered in Sarah's mind like the scent of fresh earth after a storm. Life had returned to its usual rhythm: work, daycare, bills, but something had shifted inside her. Not just relief from Deshawn's kindness, but a warmth she couldn't quite name. She didn't expect to see him again. People like that, quiet, helpful, kind without asking for anything, usually vanished just as quickly as they appeared. It was Saturday morning when she and Lucas headed to the local grocery store. The shelves were half stocked, fluorescent lights flickering overhead, and Lucas sat in the shopping cart singing quietly to himself. Sarah scanned her list, carefully choosing off brand cereal and comparing prices on canned soup, her mind already doing mental math with what little she had in her wallet. At the checkout line, Lucas suddenly tugged on her sleeve. "Mommy," he said. "Why?" Died and pointing across the store. "It's the car, man." She followed his finger and froze. There he was, Deshawn, standing at the self-checkout kiosk, scanning a small basket of baby formula, diapers, and a bag of frozen peas. His jacket was damp from the rain outside, his expression focused as he bounced gently on his heels, trying to soothe a baby strapped to his chest in a soft carrier. The little girl, tiny and curly-haired, was fast asleep against him. Sarah hesitated, heart suddenly racing. She smoothed her hair and forced herself to walk over. "Hey," she called with a tentative smile. "Deshawn, right." He turned and grinned, the tiredness in his eyes easing just a little. "Well, if it isn't the Chevy lady." She laughed. "Fancy seeing you here." "Willow Creek's small," he said, scanning the last item. "You eventually run into everyone." Lucas ran up to him, face lit with joy. "Hi, you fixed our car." Deshawn knelt slightly to greet him. "I remember you, little man. How's the engine holding up?" "Mommy says it's working better than ever." Lucas beamed. Sarah's eyes shifted to the sleeping infant. "She's beautiful." He looked down, his expression softening. "This is Ava, my little hurricane. Is she yours?" she asked gently. "Yeah," he said, adjusting the carrier. "I'm a full-time dad now. Her mom passed away when Ava was born." Sarah's heart clenched. "I'm so sorry. That's incredibly tough." He nodded slowly. "Some days are harder than others, but she's worth every second." There was a pause, one of those quiet, heavy moments where both people realize they've walked similar paths. She didn't ask for details, and he didn't offer them. But somehow, in that brief silence, she felt they understood each other. On impulse, she found herself saying, "Would you maybe want to come by this weekend? Lucas won't stop talking about you." Deshawn blinked, surprised but not unpleasantly so. "Yeah, I'd like that." That Saturday, just after noon, Deshawn pulled up to Sarah's modest duplex in his rusty truck. He stepped out with Ava on his hip, a diaper bag slung over his shoulder, and a nervous smile on his face. Sarah met them at the door, dressed in a simple sweater and jeans, her hair tied back. Lucas squealed with excitement, already tugging Deshawn toward the backyard. The two children clicked instantly. Ava giggled as Lucas spun her in slow, careful circles on the grass. Sarah and Deshawn sat on a bench near the porch, watching them play while sipping lukewarm coffee. They talked for hours about late-night feedings, grocery store meltdowns, and how hard it was to be everything for your child when you felt like nothing. Deshawn shared stories of trying to work nights at the garage while Ava slept in a playpen nearby. Sarah told him about being laid off twice and taking up cleaning jobs just to keep the lights on. They laughed more than expected, not because life was easy, but because for once they weren't alone in it. And then, just as the sun started dipping behind the trees, Lucas came bounding up to them with Ava in tow. He plopped down beside Deshawn and looked up with big, hopeful eyes. "Are you gonna be my new daddy?" The question landed like a lightning bolt in the quiet air. Sarah gasped softly, eyes darting to Deshawn, who sat frozen, eyes wide, lips slightly parted. But before he could say anything, Sarah did something neither of them expected. She turned to him and with a quiet breath asked, "Would you want to be?" The world seemed to pause. Deshawn looked at her, really looked at the woman who had offered him kindness without obligation, at the boy who had found safety in his presence, at his daughter now sitting peacefully in Lucas's lap. He cleared his throat, his voice low. "That's a big question." Sarah nodded slowly. "It doesn't have to be today. I just wanted to ask." And in that moment something shifted. Something fragile but real began to bloom, not quite love, not yet, but the kind of trust that only comes from shared scars and silent prayers finally being heard. Deshawn drove home in silence that night. Ava had fallen asleep in her car seat, her tiny fingers curled into a fist, her chest rising and falling in that peaceful rhythm only babies seem to master. But his own heart, it was anything but calm. He couldn't stop replaying Sarah's words, "Would you want to be?" She'd asked it so gently, without pressure, like she was just floating the thought out into the universe. But that one question shook something in him. Was it too soon? He barely knew her. They'd met under random circumstances. They'd shared one afternoon together, some conversation, some laughter. And now suddenly he was being asked to consider becoming a father figure. To someone else's child, he liked her, that much was undeniable. Sarah had this quiet strength about her. She was real, no masks, no performance. Just a woman doing her best in a world that constantly made her prove herself. And Lucas, he was a good kid, thoughtful, curious, that kind of raw honesty only little kids had. But this stepping into someone's life like that. It wasn't a small thing, and what if he failed? Deshawn had already lost so much. His wife, Jasmine, had been the love of his life. Losing her during childbirth had shattered him, and now every choice he made wasn't just about himself. It was about Ava too. He couldn't bring her into something unstable. He needed to be sure. But all week, no matter how many cars he repaired or how many late night feedings he juggled, he couldn't stop thinking about Sarah. About her laugh, about the way she watched her son with tired but loving eyes. About the flicker of hope in her voice when she asked the question. Meanwhile, Sarah was having her own emotional storm. She sat up late every night, questioning herself. Why did I say that? Was it desperation, loneliness, or did I really feel something? She thought about how Ava had clung to her like they'd known each other for years. About how Lucas kept asking when they could see the car man again. About how natural it had felt, sitting beside Deshawn on that porch, just talking. She'd seen the hesitation in his eyes when Lucas asked the question, but she'd also seen something else. A flicker, a possibility, but by Thursday there was still no call, no message, just silence. Then on Friday evening, just as she was about to start dinner, there was a knock at the door. Lucas bolted from the couch. "I'll get it," but Sarah reached it first. She opened the door, and there he was. Deshawn stood awkwardly on her doorstep, holding a single sunflower, its bright yellow petals a stark contrast to the nervous look on his face. "Hey," he said. Sarah blinked, caught between surprise and relief. "Hi, can we talk?" She nodded and stepped aside, letting him in. Lucas peered from behind her leg, a hopeful grin on his face, and Ava babbled softly in her car seat on the porch. They sat outside, side by side on the wooden steps, while dusk wrapped the sky in soft blue shadows. Deshawn fidgeted with the flower, then finally spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said, what Lucas said, and I don't have an answer that's neat and tidy. I don't know if I'm ready to be someone's husband. I don't even know if I'm ready for relationship right now." Sarah felt her heart sink just a little, but she kept her face still. "But," he continued, "what I do know is I care. I care about how you and Lucas are doing, and I want to try, not as some perfect fairy tale ending, but as someone who shows up. I want to be a man Lucas can look up to. I want to see where this goes, with you, with him, and maybe with us." Tears stung Sarah's eyes before she could stop them. "I can't promise anything long-term yet," he added gently, "but I can promise honesty and effort." Sarah wiped at her cheek with the sleeve of her sweater, laughing softly. "That's more than I've ever been offered." But then his face grew serious. "There's one thing," he said. "Something I haven't told you." She looked at him, startled. "What is it?" He hesitated. "It's about Ava and her mother's family. They don't want me raising her alone. They've been trying to take her from me." Sarah's heart caught in her throat. "Wait, what?" "They filed a motion with family court," he said quietly. "They say a single father isn't stable, that Ava would be better off with them." Suddenly, this wasn't just a story about love or chance. It was about something bigger, something dangerous. And Sarah realized that the man who had saved her once might now need saving too. The evening air was thick with silence after Deshawn's confession. The kind of silence that carried weight, like thunderclouds waiting to burst. Sarah stared at him, her fingers tightening around the edge of the porch swing. She'd expected many things when she invited him into her life, but not this. Without a word, Deshawn reached into his back pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He flipped it open and carefully slid out a photo. The edges were bent, the colors faded slightly with time. He handed it to her. In the picture, a much younger Deshawn stood tall in a crisp military uniform. His posture was strong, his eyes clear and focused. Beside him stood an older man in a sharp gray suit, silver hair slicked back, his expression unreadable, bordering on cold. "My father," Deshawn said, his voice low, "State Senator Charles Maddox." Sarah blinked, taken aback. "Wait, your father is Senator Maddox," Deshawn nodded. "We don't share a last name. I took my mother's. My dad always thought it sounded too rough for politics." Sarah's frown deepened. "Why would someone with all that power be ashamed of you?" He looked away, jaw tightening. "Because I didn't follow the script. He wanted me to go to law school, join his office, keep the legacy clean and polished. Instead, I joined the army, then became a mechanic. And worst of all, least in his eyes, I married someone he didn't approve of." Because of her background, Sarah guessed quietly. Deshawn nodded. "Jasmine was from the south side of Atlanta, grew up poor like me. My father said she wasn't wife material. Said she was using me to climb the ladder, but she never cared about the name. All she cared about was building a family." Sarah held the photo carefully, sensing the pain behind his words. "What happened when she died?" Deshawn exhaled hard, eyes turning distant. "My father came to the hospital, offered to take Ava, said I wasn't capable of raising her alone, that I'd ruin her future with my blue-collar life. He even brought lawyers with him. The day after Jasmine died," Sarah covered her mouth, horrified. "That's inhuman. I turned him down, told him to leave. We haven't spoken since. I thought that was the end of it." He took the photo back, sliding it into his wallet with a tired hand. "But last week, one of his aides showed up at my job, said they'd heard I was involved with someone. My father thinks that makes me unstable, jumping into a relationship, exposing Ava to strangers. He's trying to build a case against me, saying I'm creating an unsafe environment." Sarah felt her stomach twist. "But that's not true, no," Deshawn said quietly. "But he doesn't need truth, just perception. He's got influence in court, friends in high places, media connections. If he paints me as reckless or unstable, he could take Ava from me." He looked her straight in the eye then, his gaze heavy with warning. "And if he finds out about you about Lucas, he could twist that too, use you both as proof that I'm dragging Ava into a chaotic life." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just about Deshawn anymore. Her son could get pulled into a storm he didn't deserve. Her life, already fragile, could be upended by the whims of a powerful man she'd never even met. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked softly, because you deserve to know what you're stepping into. He said, You and Lucas don't need my baggage. I wouldn't blame you if you walked away. Sarah stared at him for a long moment, her mind racing. And then, slowly, she stood up, straightened her shoulders, looked him dead in the eye. You think I haven't faced storms before, she said. I've been homeless, I've been hungry, I've held my sick kid through nights so cold I thought his breath would freeze. I've fought to survive, so no, I'm not walking away. She placed a hand on his. You said you want to show up? Well, so will I for you, for Ava, and you don't have to worry about protecting us alone. Her voice was steady, fierce. Let your father come, let him throw his weight around, we protect our own here. Deshawn's throat tightened, his eyes shimmering as the sun dipped below the trees. He hadn't expected this kind of loyalty, not after all the disappointment he'd known. But somehow, in this woman who had almost nothing to offer except her heart, he found more strength than he'd ever seen in a courtroom. And for the first time in a long time, he let himself believe they just might have a fighting chance. The tension began subtly, barely noticeable at first. A hang-up call during dinner. A black car idling just a few houses down, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. Sarah noticed it first. Deshawn tried to dismiss it as paranoia, but deep down he knew better. It was his father's way of sending a message, I'm watching. Sarah became more cautious. She kept Lucas close, double-checked the locks, and made sure Ava's daycare had emergency contacts. She didn't say much, but the anxiety clung to her like a second skin. Still, she never once wavered. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, she told Deshawn one night as they cleaned up dinner, but I don't regret any of it, not for 1 second. He nodded, grateful but burdened. He's trying to scare me into compliance. He thinks power gives him the right to manipulate everyone around him, but not this time. Then, on a gray Thursday morning, the knock came. It was precise, firm, the kind of knock that didn't ask permission. It demanded it. Deshawn opened the door to find his father standing there in a finely pressed suit, his shoes shining like mirrors, his face cold and unreadable. Behind him was the same black car, engine humming. I'll make this simple, Senator Charles Maddox said, stepping forward like he owned the ground he stood on. Come home, walk away from this farce, leave these people, and I'll make sure you and Ava live comfortably. Resist, and I'll destroy everything they love. Sarah stood at the top of the stairs, Lucas clutching her leg, eyes wide with fear. But she stepped forward anyway, down to stand beside Deshawn. You can't ruin what you never built, Deshawn said, his voice calm but full of steel. The senator's jaw twitched. I built you, I gave you everything, and this mess you've thrown yourself into, it reflects on me. Sarah met his glare with one of her own. He's already chosen his family, she said evenly, and it's not you. There was a beat of silence. For a moment it felt like the world stopped spinning. Senator Maddox's eyes narrowed, but he saw something in his son's face resolve. Immovable, the kind of conviction that no amount of wealth or political pressure could break. Without another word, he turned and walked back to his car. The door slammed, the vehicle pulled away, disappearing down the road. Just like that, the storm passed. In the days that followed, life began to settle, the strange calls stopped, the black car never returned. It was as if the senator had realized that intimidation had failed, and pride wouldn't let him try again. Sarah exhaled for the first time in what felt like weeks. She and Deshawn grew closer, not just emotionally, but in the quiet, meaningful ways that defined real partnership. They took turns doing school runs, fixed up the old Chevy together, made dinners with Ava in her high chair and Lucas drawing superheroes at the kitchen table. There were still hard days, but they faced them as a team, and it was in those everyday moments that something beautiful began to bloom. Trust. Real, grounded, hard-earned trust. One evening, the sun low and golden across the backyard, Lucas and Deshawn tossed a ball back and forth. Ava toddled nearby, clapping each time the ball was caught, her laughter ringing like music. Then, as the game slowed, Lucas stood still, the ball in his small hands. He looked at Deshawn with thoughtful eyes, the kind that saw more than most adults gave him credit for. So are you my dad now? He asked, The question floated in the warm air like a leaf on wind. Deshaun crouched to meet him at eye level, his voice soft but steady. "I am if you'll have me." Lucas paused, tilting his head. Then he nodded once, "Okay." It wasn't dramatic. No swelling music. Just two people agreeing to love each other the best they could. From the kitchen window Sarah watched, her heart overflowing. She stepped outside, wrapped her arms around both of them, and kissed Lucas on the head. Ava now tugging at her leg with a squeal. A family not perfect, not planned, but real, and it had all begun on a stormy night with an overheated engine and a stranger who chose to stop. Not just for a car, but for something much greater. Sometimes life gives us unexpected detours, a broken-down car, a curious child's question, or a stranger with kind eyes. For Sarah, Lucas, and Deshaun, what started as a moment of crisis turned into the beginning of something extraordinary. They weren't looking for love, for family, or for healing. But somehow they found all three in the most unplanned way. Not every hero wears a cape. Some carry a wrench, a diaper bag, and the quiet strength to say yes when it matters most. Thanks for watching. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in second chances and the power of unexpected love. What would you have done if you were in Sarah's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can lead to the biggest changes in our lives. See you in the next episode of Hidden Realities.